Hello, Ange here. I'm back. I've got my next tutorial here and we're going to be making a hand-stitched glasses case. And it's just got a button closure and that's it. And the whole thing is done by hand. So for this you're going to need felt. This is the felt fabric. What's really special about this is it doesn't fray, so you can just finish the edges by hand. And you're going to need some yarn. So I'm using here Badger Face Welsh Mountain 100% wool Aran. This is from the Wool Clip, so this is actually produced in Cumbria as well. And you're going to need a button, and the button needs to have holes that are big enough for your chunky needle to pass through, like that. And you're going to need a needle. It needs to be sharp and it needs to have a big eye for the yarn to pass through. So, got all of our stuff, so we'll get started. So we've got our piece of felt here. I have shaped the end of it, which you can do however you want to, but I would recommend that you fold your piece of felt in half, and then whatever you do on the end will be symmetrical. So I'm just curved it down slightly towards the edges, so that when you open it up you get this nice sort of envelope shape. So we're going to do this in two sections. We're going to stitch along this edge first, then we're going to fold the whole thing into position like that, and then we're going to go all the way around there. Okay, so this edge and then all this way around, and when we get to here we're going to stop and create our loop, and the loop is going to be what closes it, and then we'll fix the button on here. All right, I'm going to just show you how to thread a needle. You might already know this, but this is a really useful thing to know. And I'm going to show you with yarn and a thick, wide, where's the camera? As you can see, that needle's got quite a big eye on it. But you'll be able to use this exact technique when you're using like a tiny needle and thread as well. So it's a good skill. But if you practice this with using yarn and a chunky needle, it will tell you everything that you need. So as you can see, if you look at your yarn quite closely, it's twisted like a rope. So what we're going to do to begin with is we're just going to untwist a section of it, and if you'll be able to see that when you untwist it, this yarn is made up of 3 strands. So once it's untwisted, you're just going to lay it over your finger, and you're going to slide the pointy end of your needle underneath, and then you're going to pull the yarn down either side, and you're going to then pinch it. So make sure that that yarn is pulled into a really tight fold, okay? And then you can just slide the needle out. Okay, so you've got your fabric just peeking out, sorry, not fabric, you've got your yarn fold peeking out of your fingers here. And that's folded really tight. So now you can get the eye of the needle, and you can put the eye over the fold and then start to wiggle it down onto the fold. The fold is much firmer to push through the eye of the needle than the ends of it are, and that's why we do it like that. So there, then you just pull the ends through. You can practice that a few times if you need to. It's quite a handy thing to get the hang of. So the first thing we're going to do is blanket stitch across this straight edge. Now to get started we need to do something. Beginning stitch. This stitch isn't the same as the others. So we're going to pull the yarn through in this position. Okay, and leave a little bit sticking out. Okay, then we're going to go back through that hole. We're going to hold this out of the way and hold this out of the way while we're doing that. Okay, you're going to pull it so that you've got a bit of a loop sticking out. Now you can leave your tail end to one side, but this part that's got the needle on it, you're going to bring that through the loop. Okay, now we're going to make sure that that loop ends up pointing straight upwards onto the edge of the fabric. So what we should have here is a stitch. The yarn is now anchored at the edge of the fabric, and we've got this tail end over here, which we will sew in later on, but that's nice and secure. So now what we need to do to create our blanket stitch is we need to stitch into the front of the fabric and pull it back. But before we close the loop, we're going to take our needle and bring it through the loop. And what happens then, this bit's a bit fiddly because we need to make sure that these loose ends are out of the way while we're doing this. What happens then is that when we pull that tight, we get half a square instead of a straight stitch, because it goes from here and it goes to the corner and then it comes down. So if we do that again, before we close the loop, we come up through it. Oops, pardon my wobbly camera. Let's just get that tail end out of the way again. Okay, so what we're ending up with is we're edging the fabric with a running stitch of yarn, and at the same time we're stitching into the fabric, so we end up with this really nice effect, and it's really decorative. We just look at the finished one again. Look how pretty that is when you've done that all the way around. So I'm going to do a couple more steps so that you can rewind this and check it. You can look at this as many times as you need to. So we're going down through the fabric, and then before the loop goes all the way through, we're bringing the needle up through it like that. Just keeping that tail end out of the way. I've really got to stop hitting the tripod. So down through the fabric. Now once you start getting quicker at this, you'll realise that you can just put that yarn behind the needle, and that means that you're already coming up through the loop, and you start to get those two steps in one. But you can tell as you get to the end of the stitch if you're going to close the loop and the yarn isn't through it. You start to get a feel for that. So Just make sure that that's not hooked over the corner when you get to the end. Okay. There we go. Now when we get to the end, we'll just leave a little bit of length, and then we can stitch those into the sides later. Right, so we've got our blanket stitched edge, we've got the tail end sticking out. So now I'm just folding it up to get it in position because I want to know exactly where I need to be working from. So I can see that my folds are going to be here, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit because I don't want the point of the envelope flap to reach all the way down. So I'm going to have it about there, I think, because we need to leave space for the button to go underneath. So I think that will be fine. So what you're going to do is you're going to, where the fold is, you're going to go inside with your needle there and just pull that through, but leaving a tail. Ooh, this is the really long bit of yarn because we need to get all the way around this, so make sure you've given yourself plenty to work with. Mine's got knotty. Okay, so I'm going to leave a bit of a tail end, and then we're going to go back through the same hole again. So we're just doing the same thing that we did before, but we're just doing it on the fold this time. And hold that out of the way. There we are. This might be a bit trickier to pull through, but just go right to the end, leave a little loop, and then just let your needle go through that loop. Oops. So that when you pull all of your yarn through, it ends up with a loop that goes right to the outside. Okay. So we're going to look at these tail ends now. So I'm going to lie this one along here, and I'm going to lie this one, sorry, I'm going to show you that again because the camera wasn't positioned very well. So we've got these two tail ends. I'm going to lie that one there, and I'm going to lie that one there, and then I'm going to sandwich them together. And if there's any bits sticking out, that's all right because we can trim those off afterwards. We just want to have those tail ends lying quite near the edge so we can stitch them in. And then we're just going to start doing our blanket stitch again, but this time we're going through 2 layers of fabric, so it's going to be a little bit tougher to get through. But this is joining the sides of our glasses case together. Got a knot here. Just give me a minute and I'll get rid of that. These stitches take longer because you've got so much yarn to work with, but that's normal. As long as you're expecting it, it's all right. Oops. There we go. I did that one a bit too tight because I thought I had all of that yarn to pull through, and actually it was another bit of yarn that I'd managed to pick up. Oops. Right. Just make sure that that's not hooked over the corner when you get to the end. Okay. There we go. Now when we get to the end, we'll just leave a little bit of length, and then we can stitch those into the sides later. Right, so we've got our blanket stitched edge, we've got the tail end sticking out. So now I'm just folding it up to get it in position because I want to know exactly where I need to be working from. So I can see that my folds are going to be here, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit because I don't want the point of the envelope flap to reach all the way down. So I'm going to have it about there, I think, because we need to leave space for the button to go underneath. So I think that will be fine. So what you're going to do is you're going to, where the fold is, you're going to go inside with your needle there and just pull that through, but leaving a tail. Ooh, this is the really long bit of yarn because we need to get all the way around this, so make sure you've given yourself plenty to work with. Mine's got knotty. Okay, so I'm going to leave a bit of a tail end, and then we're going to go back through the same hole again. So we're just doing the same thing that we did before, but we're just doing it on the fold this time. And hold that out of the way. There we are. This might be a bit trickier to pull through, but just go right to the end, leave a little loop, and then just let your needle go through that loop. Oops. So that when you pull all of your yarn through, it ends up with a loop that goes right to the outside. Okay. So we're going to look at these tail ends now. So I'm going to lie this one along here, and I'm going to lie this one. Sorry, I'm going to show you that again because the camera wasn't positioned very well. So we've got these two tail ends. I'm going to lie that one there, and I'm going to lie that one there, and then I'm going to sandwich them together. And if there's any bits sticking out, that's all right because we can trim those off afterwards. We just want to have those tail ends lying quite near the edge. so we can stitch them in. And then we're just going to start doing our blanket stitch again, but this time we're going through 2 layers of fabric, these stitches take longer because you've got so much yarn to work with, but that's normal. As long as you're expecting it, it's all right. Oops. There we go. I did that one a bit too tight because I thought I had all of that yarn to pull through, and actually it was another bit of yarn that I'd managed to pick up. When you get to the corner, going around the outside, you're just going to put your stitches a bit closer together because the outside of the stitch will stay about the same size, or it might even get a bit bigger because of going around a corner. So if you make the ones on the inside a bit smaller, then the stitches will just curve around and stay quite even on the outside. Right, I've just stopped where I've got to the middle here, and we are pretty much halfway across. In fact, maybe one more stitch will just put us right in the middle, so we'll do one more. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to knot this stitch that we've just made. Okay, so I'm just going to come through that loop again. And then I'm just going to put a couple of twists around as I go through. You might have to kind of ease this knot down as you tighten it. That's it. There. Okay. Now I'm going to take the button that I'm going to use. I'm going to use that one. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make another loop through the knot, but when we get to the end I'll keep the loop just the right size for the button, but we need to close it before we can see. So we just want it to be able to go around the button. It's a little bit extra, but not too much. So as long as you just pull the loop closed, pull it here while you're holding onto the knot, just make sure that it moves around the button quite comfortably. And and then we'll just go through the knot again. So you're going to need to pinch the knot while you pull the needle through it, and then keep pinching it while you pull the yarn through, and that's going to stop our loop from getting bigger or smaller. And it will also just get the yarn back to where we need it to do the next stitch. So if we just check that that loop is stable and it still goes around the button quite happily, and it looks tidy, and it's just ready for the next stitch. So all you do from there is carry on with your next blanket stitch, and when you've got that stitch nice and tight, you'll see that your blanket stitch is carried on, but you've got a loop there for your button. So we'll just carry on blanket stitching all the way around. Right, what we need to do now is stitch on the button. So we're going to just see what position it needs to be in first. So if we just pop our button there, that's where it needs to go. So I'm going to just put my fingers on the back of that, and I'm just going to put the needle through. Now you might have to feel around on the back to find where there's a buttonhole. So I found one. I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to just snip off a bit of yarn because we don't need a lot for this. Sorry, I keep wobbling my camera. We don't need a lot for this. All we're going to do, let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we've got our end coming from the back, and there's the button. If you've got two holes, then you're going to come out from one hole and go into the other hole with your fingers behind the fabric so that you can pull the needle through, and you're going to do that twice. If you've got four holes, you can make a cross on them, and that looks really pretty. So I'm going to do that. So I'm catching the needle on the other side to make sure it doesn't go through the back. Okay, we've still got our tail end there. Then we're going to look for the bottom left hole, and like I say before, you're just going to have to stab it a few times until you find it. Keep your tail end out of the way because we want to keep that where we can find it again later. Okay, nice and tight, and through the top right corner. So we've now got a cross on our button and two tail ends. So if you cut your yarn so that it's the same length as your tail end, and then if you just turn this inside out, all you're going to do is a very simple knot with both pieces of yarn at the same time. As you're tightening up the knot, just keep the loop touching the yarn so that when you pull it tight, it's there. If there's a little bit of slack underneath, then do another knot and loop the yarn around under the knot, and that will pull the knot tighter, okay? And then you're just going to snip those off, a bit shorter perhaps. And then when you turn it inside out, you'll see that your knot is secure. If you fold that over, mine's really hairy. Look at all of this. That's all from the yarn. You'll see that. You can get the loop around the glasses case and that closes it. And that's finished. It's all done. The back of it you can see is really plain, and that gives you some options for decorating it with other embroidery stitches if you wanted to. And I will do another video soon showing you how you can do some really simple stitches and marks just using yarn and a needle, so that you can decorate it if you want to. So go ahead and give it a go and show me what you've done. I'll be really interested to see it. Thank you for joining me.